Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.
And turning our attention now to the deadly flooding in central China. Shocking online videos captured piles of cars crammed inside a tunnel when water poured in. Bodies were later carried out in tightly sealed foam boxes. But just how did the disaster happen? Here's that report.
This is a tunnel, not a river. But here's how the entrance of the tunnel looked like after Zhengzhou city in central China's Henan province flooded on Tuesday. These people were still breathing a few minutes ago. The tunnel has 6 lanes and is about 3 miles long. Reports say floodwater filled this giant underground tube in 5 minutes. Local residents say there are often traffic jams in this miles-long tunnel. What's worse, the floodwater poured in during rush hours. Someone did a simulation of the scenario and concluded that there is no way to survive, theoretically speaking. The casualties must be stunning. Another social media post emphasizes that there was a traffic jam when it flooded. A video shows drivers trying to escape the tunnel, but the toll booth were still stopping every car at the exit, asking them to scan in order to pay the tolls.
里头车全部都闷进去了，车里头都有司机啊，都有人呐，都是一家一家的呀。你说这咋弄啊？你说说。
A missing persons list from Chinese media, The Paper, tells the story of 2 14-year-old boys trapped in the tunnel. The report says they entered the tunnel on their electric bikes. One boy called his classmate, saying his bike was washed away. That was around 5 p.m. Tuesday afternoon. When their classmates got there some 15 minutes later, the water in the entrance of the tunnel already reached their knees, and the currents were too strong for them to get inside. A post says a lot of people were carried out. They were all sealed in white foam boxes, and onlookers were not allowed at the scene. Now the police are blocking the intersection around the entrance of the tunnel and keeping people hundreds of feet away.
肯定是吧？有啥事呗，对吧？大家心里知道，肯定是不想让大家看见的事情。
President Biden signed a Victims of Crimes Act fix into law. The bipartisan bill will provide a new revenue source to support crime victim service programs around the nation.
President Biden signed the bill Thursday. Also in attendance, Vice President Harris and some of the main sponsors of the bill.
Today, I think is a day of hope. I mean that, a day of hope and healing for victims of crime and organizations that support those victims of crime.
The bill provides new sources of funds for the Crime Victims Fund, which offers grants for state-level programs that help victims of crimes. The fund currently relies on criminal penalties and forfeitures, among other revenue sources, but those funds have been shrinking in recent years. The bill redirects monetary penalties into the fund that come from certain federal agreements, fees that would otherwise have gone to a general treasury fund. It also increases the percentage of state compensation payments to victims from 60% to 75%, and directs states to waive the matching requirement for 1 year after the pandemic.
This bill is going to allow us to make sure that all the fines and penalties that are from federal cases go into the Crime Victims Fund to rebuild this fund, because it's badly needed.
House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler introduced the bill. It's one of the few pieces of legislation drawing bipartisan support from a highly polarized Congress. The Senate passed the bill unanimously on Tuesday after the House approved it in March.
With the California gubernatorial recall election approaching, a new poll reveals that a radio talk show host is leading the race. Here's NTD's Eileen Ang with more details.
A new poll by Emerson College reveals that Larry Elder is leading the gubernatorial race to replace incumbent Gavin Newsom. Elder is a conservative radio personality and hosts a show on NTD's sister media, Epic TV. The poll consisted of more than 1,000 registered voters. Voters were asked, which candidate would you vote for to replace Governor Gavin Newsom if he is recalled? Elder led at 16%. John Cox and Kevin Faulconer are both at 6%. 53% are undecided. Elder was nearly kept off the ballots for the race. He sued the election officials for preventing him from running in the recall election, claiming he had incomplete tax returns. On Wednesday, a Sacramento Superior Court judge ruled in Elder's favor, saying he is not required to file a tax return to run in the recall election, as opposed to a primary election. His name will be on the ballot on September 14th. Another poll revealed that California voters are split between recalling or keeping Newsom. 43% vote to recall him, 48% vote to keep him, while 9% are undecided. The poll showed that most people thought the governor handled the pandemic, homelessness, wildfires, and drought poorly. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
And we'll have more reports on the devastating floods in China coming up in the second half of the show. So be sure to stay tuned for that at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And on Thursday, China rejected a plan from the WHO to carry out a second phase of investigations into the origins of the CCP-virus, or coronavirus. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki called the CCP's position, quote, irresponsible and frankly dangerous.
It's not just the United States calling for this. As a part of our renewed engagement and our efforts to build a coalition of support around the world with allies and partners, we're joined by the international community on this. Partners and multilateral organizations who are also calling for and pressuring China to be engaged in the second phase of this discussion.
Psaki reiterated the importance of a transparent and independent analysis after China failed to provide necessary data and access in the WHO's Phase 1 investigations. Earlier on Thursday, China's Vice Minister of the National Health Commission stated that he was taken aback by the hypothesis in the Phase 2 plan that the virus may have leaked from a Chinese lab. He urged the WHO to turn its origin tracing efforts to other countries instead. We begin the evening with news from the White House. President Biden issues sanctions on a Cuban official and government entity for serious human rights abuse. It's a direct response to the Cuban regime's crackdown on the historic protests that have been taking place across the island. In doing so, the U.S. government reaffirms its support for the Cuban people in their fight against communism. NTD's Lin Lin brings us more.
The sanctions imposed on Thursday by the Treasury Department targets the head of the Cuban military and an Interior Ministry Special Forces unit that was responsible for driving the crackdown. President Biden said in a statement that the sanctions are just the beginning. He said the United States stands with the brave Cubans who have taken to the streets to oppose 62 years of repression under a communist regime. The sanctions were issued under the Global Magnitsky Act, used to punish human rights violators with asset freezes and travel bans. The protests began earlier this month when thousands of Cubans marched to protest food and medicine shortages across the country, with many calling for political change. Activists say Cuban authorities detained hundreds of demonstrators. Biden promised to reverse part of Trump's Cuba policies during his campaign. Despite progressive voices in his party calling to end the Cuba embargo, Biden's new movement signal he is unlikely to soften the U.S. stance anytime soon. Lin Lin, NTD News.
A law firm says 3 college students in Louisiana are faced with a choice: get vaccinated for COVID against their religious conscience or lose their already paid for tuition. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more from their lawyer, who says they're ready to take the college to court.
If you're from Louisiana, you'd probably know that turning down vaccines is a legal right. The law says so here. All you need is a written dissent. But a law firm says 3 college students at Edwards Via College of Osteopathic Medicine are on the verge of losing their tuition money for turning medicine down.
The clock is ticking and the sand in the hour jar, if you will, is about ready to run out.
Matt Staver is the founder of Liberty Counsel, a law firm representing all 3 students being forced to vaccinate against COVID. Staver's team has sent a letter to the college demanding that they give these students a pass for religious reasons.
How long will you wait before filing a lawsuit? Why not file a lawsuit now?
Well, we wanted to give the college an opportunity to respond and do the right thing. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that these students can return to school. School is going to begin fairly soon. We will not wait to the final moment for this to ultimately be resolved. We want them to be able to return to school, number one. We want them to be able to return to school without any harassment, number two. And we want no retaliation upon their graduation.
Besides state law, Staver argues that the college is also breaking federal law. We haven't heard back from the college on how they'll respond. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
In South Dakota, Freedom Fest is bringing together thinkers from all over the nation. They're discussing what it means to live in a free society and how people can work together to protect it. NTD's Melina Weisskopf is at the festival this week. She spoke with education influencers about how to ensure upright values in education.
American school children spend more time at school than they do at home. And with curriculum such as critical race theory and alternative history like the 1619 Project making its way into classrooms around the nation, parents are starting to notice more and more flaws within the education system. But some education enthusiasts and activists here at Freedom Fest tell us that this is a centuries-old issue. One education activist and children's book author says that the people who created public education as we know it today didn't start with the goal of educating children. Instead, they had a goal of social reform.
These individuals like John Dewey, John Goodlad, and others were secular humanists. They were atheists. They didn't believe in God. They were socialists. They had this idea that the collective is better than the individual. So they didn't like that people were getting their own education wherever in random places and in the home. They wanted to bring every kid together. They wanted to put them almost like on a conveyor belt to have a predictable product that they could churn out, that they would no longer be resistant. They would be more docile.
Dr. Larry Arnn is the president of Hillsdale College, and he spoke to a group here at Freedom Fest where he said that the whole society has been turned into a social engineering project.
Just read critical race theory. What they're saying is you cannot have any understanding outside your background and your physical characteristics, which means that's the destruction of the human soul and any chance at learning. The truth is, Greek philosophy, the founder of the Western tradition, they're asking the question, what is it to be a human being? And that's what we should be talking about in college.
Both of the education enthusiasts that we spoke to here said that they believe that children have an intrinsic nature to learn. However, the modern education system oftentimes suppresses that intrinsic will to want to learn. They suggest that one solution to this issue would be for parents to take back the driver's seat in their child's education.
Children that are given to you by God, you are to be a role model and an example for.
And so for those of us who are trying to fight for a freer world, really what we're involved in is that cultural battle of trying to have strong families so that we can not rely on the government for everything. We can build up strong families so that we can teach these ideas to kids and make sure that we're sharing these values.
Now, Boyack is working on curriculum right now, and he's also published multiple children's books to teach what it means to live in a free society. And Dr. Arnn right now has just released the 1776 curriculum for parents and teachers to use to teach their children about the history of America. Dr. Arnn is also working on opening charter schools around the nation. Reporting in Rapid City, South Dakota, Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Reports keep pouring in on the deadly flood in a Chinese city of 10 million. Disturbing online videos show flood victims lying lifelessly inside subway stations. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
Zhengzhou residents are demanding to know why authorities failed to warn them of the impending flash flood. Some say authorities made the flood worse by releasing water from an upstream reservoir. At least a dozen drowned to death in a subway system that was submerged by floodwater. Hundreds were trapped in it for hours. Local authorities claim over 30 have died because of the flood, but NTD cannot independently verify the figure due to strict censorship. Chinese authorities so far are attributing the tragedy to nature, but some are questioning the role of human error in it. A look at the timeline may explain why. According to Chinese state media reports, authorities started to release water from the upstream reservoir at 10:30 Tuesday morning, July 20th. But they didn't alert downstream residents until 12 hours later at 10:30 p.m. During those 12 hours, the flood got worse in the city. But authorities kept the subway system running. Traffic was running as usual at 1:40 p.m., and the water started to flood the streets after 2 p.m. After 5 p.m., the city was pretty much submerged. And after 6 p.m., the subway cars were already flooded, with over 500 people trapped in them. Although it took authorities 12 hours to warn people about the flash flood, they were quick to crack down on warnings about the disaster. Late Tuesday night, numerous Chinese media and state agencies posted on social media, debunking what they called rumors about the reservoir. Some netizens claim the dike of the reservoir has been breached and it is releasing a massive amount of water. Authorities asked people not to believe in them and report on whoever is spreading the so-called rumor. But they did not mention that the reservoir is indeed releasing water downstream. An insider explains in a Chinese social media post that authorities' failure to act led to the disaster in the Zhengzhou subway system. In the post, the person said he or she works for the Zhengzhou subway, but didn't give his or her name. The person says leaders in every node of the subway system dared not to make decisions. To avoid taking the responsibility, operation leaders just let the trains run, even though they had already received a red-level flood warning. As a result, many rescue opportunities were wasted, and many trains were stuck in the tunnels. The insider says from when the floodwaters submerged the rails till it eventually submerged the evacuation platforms, authorities on the spot had enough time to evacuate the passengers, but they didn't. And regular employees also didn't dare to take responsibilities. The insider says the coordinators on duty should have kept the trains out of the tunnels, but they didn't. The drivers should have opened the doors and let the passengers out, but they didn't. The insider writes with expletives, these people are all killers. He or she adds that everyone in the management system had their own calculations and wanted to assume nothing will go wrong, adding this is a man-made disaster.
Navigating a world of economic madness, you need to have the right guide. What did today's decisions mean for your tomorrow? We ask why. What's the alternative? Uncover the deeper reasons and the hidden influences, and highlight the real opportunities for profit. At NTD Business, we connect the dots for you. Good evening. Thanks for joining us.